So I think my talk might be a little bit different to the ones that you usually have here. Instead of talking about a specific science project or research topic, mine is instead a brief summary of a placement I've been on during my PhD, which is arguably more interesting than my research anyway. So the slide may be a slight hint to that my placement was at the Donkey Sanctuary. And I just want to make it clear that I don't represent the Donkey Sanctuary and all the views are given on my own, things like that. This is just about my experience on my placement. So some of you may have heard of the Donkey Sanctuary. I'm sure some of you have been there as well. And if you've heard of them, you've probably seen the clips, the adverts on TV at Christmas of neglected donkeys and usually some old lady cooing over them, wanting to give them a home for life. So the Donkey Sanctuary is an animal charity that provides a sanctuary for donkeys and mules. But it's also a whole lot more than that as well. So they shelter about 7,000 donkeys in the UK and Europe alone, with 10 sanctuaries across the UK. They work in 35 countries globally, including across South America, Africa, and Asia, and they end up reaching about 2 million donkeys. They attend thousands of welfare call-outs, educate owners about how to care for their donkeys properly. And they also end up working closely with a lot of NGOs for things like humanitarian work and wildlife trade. This is through things like, one huge issue at the moment is the donkey skin trade, which is what this bottom right picture is about. And the hides are made into this gelatin called Ajayo, which are these, they look like chocolate bars or something. And this gelatin is used in Chinese medicine, often for fertility treatments or things like that, sickness. And demand has soared massively recently due to the increasing middle class in China. So that's how they get tied into things like wildlife trade, NGOs as well. And also something else that they do at the Donkey Sanctuary is research, which is why I was there. So I was based in Sidmouth in Devon, which is this lovely little seaside town, and that's where they've got their headquarters. And the research there ranges, it covers a wide spectrum, things from veterinary work to diseases, animal welfare, management, nutrition, production, but also they do branch out and do things like ecological research and humanitarian work as well, as I mentioned. So as part of my placement, I was looking for a placement where I could get involved in quite a lot of variety, lots of different projects, just kind of a feel for what I wanted from science in the future, I suppose. And one of my main projects that I was involved in is this one on the top left. It was a disease mapping project. So this was producing a disease mapping portal for the operational team and vets, somewhere where current and historical disease distributions were available alongside data sheets about them and predicted trends. This was all created in R, which I got a reasonable amount of help with. I didn't know you could do full web pages basically in R before trying this. Another project that I did was this weight tape and nomogram project in the top right. So this is basically scales to weigh equines, including horses and donkeys as well, are quite hard to come by, and especially if you're going to transport them, take them abroad or into a field, a real muddy field or something, it's pretty impractical. So you need a quick way to estimate weight. There are things available for these for horses quite readily, a weigh tape, for instance, but they're not very readily available for donkeys, and they're not very good either. So I was taking a load of biometric data and building models to estimate the weight. And just by drawing a line between the body condition score and the height here, you can get an estimate of the weight within 10 kilograms. And the body condition score is just like a body fat content kind of, scoring system. So that's something nice and easy for any kind of donkey owner to use, really. Also, so there was a load of data left over from the team's trip the previous year to India and Nepal. So this is health assessment data and survey data for the most part. I played quite a small part in this, but I think it's important to study, to highlight the study anyway. help look at the associations between socioeconomic factors and animal welfare. Some of the issue highlighted by this particular work and some of the stuff beforehand. You can use compassionate language as like a predictor for the donkey health, really. So if they're using like caring terms, that ends up as a strong enough association for them actually caring for their donkeys as well. There's lots of distancing themselves from them as an animal. There's also things like the antibiotic courses issued. So about 70% of the antibiotic courses that they issued out there were under the recommended dosage. So it would lead to like antibiotic resistance, basically. They're just things that they've only just found out that they need to look more into. And also about half of the prescriptions that were gotten hold of didn't actually require a prescription to be held, sorry. Half of the antibiotic courses that were gotten hold of didn't require a prescription. And I didn't know much about this kind of system beforehand with Indian Nepal and brick kilns, but it's as much as a humanitarian disaster as it is an animal welfare issue. Obviously, the donkeys don't have fantastic prospects and are seriously overworked, but the workers similarly have little chance of escaping this lifestyle. Many are in what's called bonded labour, where they are essentially kept in permanent debt to the kiln owners. And they can never pay it off with the kiln work that they have to do. So it's a really horrific system, really. And then finally, a project that I started just before coronavirus kind of put my placement on hold was using this pressure sensor and infrared system to determine the load of different harnesses and in different cases. So the picture to the left shows the pressure profile, and this is monitored over time. And this shows how like the movement and the shifting of loads on the donkey kind of changes the pressure across the chest and the main pressure points of the harness. The ideal harness loading kind of should be around the shoulders and avoiding trachea, and also the infrared images that are taken immediately after the harness is removed. It's a good indication to look at high pressure points, lack of like sweating, and the friction from the harness as well. The overall aim to find the most appropriate harness for each load, whilst prioritizing the animal's welfare, basically. So yeah, that was some of the projects that I was involved in. In terms of advantages and disadvantages, I'm hoping the video isn't too slow here. I'm gonna actually pause my video just so you can see it a bit clearer maybe for a moment. Hopefully it loads a bit better. So in terms of advantages and disadvantages of this placement, the advantages, there's just so many, for me anyway. I was working in a really lovely team. It was friendly and helpful, but also the sheer diversity meant that there were always a lot of different approaches, opinions, specialties, every single time when tackling a problem. So it really gave a lot of different perspectives for it. The research was refreshingly applied. The blue sky nature of my PhD is something that I have struggled with at times, but this kind of more impact focused and the fact that you can finish a research project and then maybe within a couple of weeks or months, you may actually see it active within the sanctuary and maybe even wider, was quite nice to see. The variety outside the main projects I mentioned about variety, not only was there in the research, but also so an average week would entail days doing like educational visits where you are helping teach prospective owners or community outreach or providing external teaching for universities. I got to go on a lot of ecological surveys, learn how to do that. I was mostly involved in the badger surveys. Didn't see any badgers, but there was lots of fresh latrines like this one in that picture. And then there were conservation days with volunteers. The donkey sanctuary actually own a vast amount of land, but when they've acquired that, they've had a lot of woodland on there as well and non-pasture plots, so they take care of that. They have this bit of a mini army of volunteers as well to help them handle all of that. And it's really nice to have a kind of day of manual labor a week or so to really, I don't know, get out there and kind of refresh a little bit. And then I was involved in lots of regular veterinary health assessments as well. And of course, I wouldn't be going anywhere without saying that the donkeys were a great aspect of this placement, obviously, as well. They're a really lovely animal, very friendly, very inquisitive and intelligent. Really interesting to work with, actually. Loads of character. And then finally, my takeaways from this back to my PhD is this donkey obviously trying very hard. But on a more serious note, in terms of like placements and what PhDs are often about or you hear about are transferable skills. I didn't really maybe appreciate this before I went on placement, but after actually being there and realizing that the chances of you getting a job exactly in what you've studied is very low. So being able to apply yourself to a different field, even if it's not, you're not going to be perfect at it, but even being able to give it a starting attempt to begin with is very useful. So I think a PhD really does set you up for things like that. And the cross collaboration, I really think that in the future, I would appreciate working in more multidisciplinary teams because the amount that you learn from other people and the opinions that they can share and their background just help you learn so much, really. I'd obviously like to thank the Donkey Sanctuary and especially the research team for giving me this really good opportunity. And I would urge you all to go visit at least some of their sites when all this coronavirus stuff blows over. Yeah, and thank you for Jordan and the rest of the team for this. And I'm happy to take any questions if anyone has any.
Wonderful, thank you, Dan. Quite a scarring image after some of the Zoom bombs we've just had. I may as well get the questions rolling. So Dan, obviously the Donkey Sanctuary is quite, by its very name, specific to donkeys. Is it a model that you think could be applied to other species? And do you think that could be something that could be applied quite taxonomically broadly?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I suppose so. They look after mules as well, I guess, so it extends to that, and they do have a couple of horses, I think, maybe potentially. But it's a bit of a strange one, considering that they're just focusing on donkeys. I suppose is something that came up quite a lot, and for some reason, donkeys kind of capture the heart of a lot of people in the UK. We've got a real soft spot for them, but I'm not sure, because obviously you'd have to have such a diverse range of charities if you're just focusing on a single species at a time. Probably the best ones are more, at least in terms of ecological units, I suppose, focusing on whole systems, maybe. Yeah.
Amazing. And we've had Borjo ask a question. I don't know if Borjo wants to speak it, or I can be quite. Oh yeah.
Yeah, great talk, Dan. Thank you very much, man. I love donkeys, so I'm always glad to see they're doing all right in the world.
Thank you. Yeah.
But, the disease mapping app that you did, or site that you did with that, it's really interesting. Is that still are they using that actively then to track? And what kind of diseases specifically are they looking to track across the world?
Yeah, so when because my placement's on pause basically for now because of coronavirus, but yeah, I'd got basically everything underway, everything done. All I needed to do was add the diseases to kind of like the data in the background. But yeah, as far as I know, they're trying to set that up now because they're also reworking a lot of their global program at the moment. So they're going to use a lot of this data. That's why they were quite urgent for it. Or quite desperate for it. They were going to use a lot of this data to kind of inform their decisions. A lot of it is to prepare for their visits abroad, basically. So if they know there's zoonotic diseases or particular diseases, they know what to take and how to prepare for that particular case. Yeah, hopefully develop it more when I get a chance. Wonderful.
We've had another question as well in the chat. Steph has asked, thanks, Daniel. That looks like such a fun project. So not so much asked that, but the infrared work was fascinating. I was wondering if different breeds of donkeys have different needs in terms of bearing loads comfortably.
So that's definitely something to look at. I think we got about 2 weeks into it before we had to stop because people had to go into lockdown. But that's definitely something, because a huge difference in the donkey breeds obviously is the size of them as well. And how well they can bear load. So there definitely will be a case of that. I think a lot of the time you do get this kind of standard average donkey size. So I think to begin with, we're going to focus just on that kind of, main breed, or definitely something to look at.
There's definitely a rhyme in that. Different breeds, different needs. Take that forward.
Good slogan for it.
Amazing. We've had another question as well from Ed, which is a bit of a deep, emotional, perhaps existential question. How did it make you feel whilst working there? As a sanctuary, I'm assuming that you see some difficult cases as and when donkeys are taken in.
Yeah, so they get them in horrendous conditions, and even some of the most horrendous conditions in the UK, I think, are secondary to a lot of the stuff that's going on in the rest of the world, really. But it's very lovely working there, because you see that a lot of people genuinely really care about the donkeys, though. So they never, like, one of their things is that they never turn a donkey away that's in need. So they always give like a good sanctuary and a good home to any donkey that does need it. So although it's difficult seeing them, and of course there's cases where the donkeys have to be put down because that is in their best interest, it's the same with any animal. Like, being surrounded by people who so openly care for them and want to give the donkeys the best in life is, it outweighs any of the negatives, really, I guess.
A donkey in need is a donkey indeed.